In the valley of the Ruhr River, in the German sprawl of Essen, stands the head office of the largest corporation on Earth. Its holdings girdle the planet: steel, chemicals, banking, shipping, aerospace, arms. And by the 2070s, it ranks first among all the corporate powers of the Sixth World. Its slogan is 3 words long: one step ahead. A company of that size is normally owned by everyone and by no one. Its stock scattered across exchanges and pension funds and 100,000 portfolios. This one has a single owner. He holds, in effect, every share of it. He attends his own board meetings, he signs his own decisions, and he has run the firm without interruption for longer than most of his employees have been alive. He is called Lofwyr. He is a great dragon, gold-scaled, vast, older than any nation whose flag still flies, and by the sober consensus of the age, the single most feared being alive. The corporation is called Saeder-Krupp. The Sixth World has spent half a century learning what those 2 names mean when spoken together. And mark the strangest part. Of all the powers of this age, he is the least hidden. His name stands on the letterhead. His ownership is public record. Anyone, anywhere, can look up exactly what the dragon owns. No one, in 50 years of looking, has been able to say what the dragon wants. This is the account of the owner of Essen, where he came from, how he took it in a single morning, what he has built with it since, and the question that stands open at the center of him to this day. The Sixth World moves fast, and it forgets faster. Some things must not be forgotten. This is one of them. To find him, the chronicle must reach back to the winter that broke the old world open, the turn of 2011 into 2012, when magic came flooding back into the earth, and the age called the Awakening began. Those first years have their own entries in this archive: the dragon over the Japanese bullet train, the changed children, the terror and the wonder. What matters here is a single absence. The great dragons returned to a world of cameras, and most of them met it face on. One raced a train beneath Mount Fuji in full view of its passengers. Another rose from a frozen American lake a month later and gave a broadcast interview that lasted half a day. Dunkelzahn, the dragon the world would one day elect to a presidency, whose whole strange story this archive has already told. Their arrivals were spectacles. They were meant to be. Lofwyr has no such scene. Search the histories of the Awakening for his entrance, and you find no lake, no cameras, no first flight caught on film. The accounts that survive place his early movements in Germany, among the industries of the Rhine and the Ruhr, and they show him already busy. Quietly, and through other names, he was buying. By the time the public learned of the Gold Dragon at all, he was already a shareholder of long standing. The other great worms announced themselves to the world's cameras. He announced himself to its commercial registers. It is the earliest fact the histories hold about him, and it has never stopped being true. By the time you see him, the buying is done. To understand what came next, set aside the question of what a dragon is, and ask instead what money is to a creature like this. The old stories agree on one image: the dragon on its mountain of gold, sleeping on coins it will never spend. The stories treat it as greed. The sixth world reads it differently now. A dragon gathers wealth for a reason older than spending. To a mind that measures time in civilizations, treasure is territory, dominion made solid, the proof of reach that remains when the wings are folded. The pile of gold was never a purse. It was a border. Now set such a creature down in the 21st century. Let it study how the small peoples arrange their world. It would find that the gold had moved. The modern Earth keeps its dominion on paper, in shares, deeds, debts, and contracts. And a share is a wonderful thing. A piece of a human enterprise that can be acquired with no fire and no flight, in perfect silence, by anyone with patience and funds. Enough of those pieces, and the enterprise belongs to you as completely as any mountain ever belonged to any worm. And patience is the one commodity a great dragon owns beyond counting. Human investors work against a clock. They must see their returns while they are alive to enjoy them. A being that does not age can plant capital like forest oaks, buy a little every quarter for 20 years, and never once feel the time pass. Compound interest, the accountant's quiet miracle, was waiting all along for a customer who cannot die. So the histories of the early Sixth World carry a new kind of monster through their margins, the investor that outlives its bankers. Across the 20s and into the 30s, while the world burned and remade itself, the golden worm of the Ruhr was converting an ancient fortune into a modern one, and the modern world, which had rules against nearly everything, had no rule at all against being purchased. The first time his name enters the political record, it is attached to a throne. In 2035, in the Pacific Northwest of North America, the elves of the awakened world carved out a country of their own, Tir Tairngire, the land of promise, a nation founded on magic, ruled by a council of princes, and closed, almost from its first day, to outsiders. The founders named Lou Shorehand their high prince, and then, the histories note with an audible clench of teeth, they made room at the council table for one member who was neither an elf nor small. The great dragon Lofwyr, admitted, in the record's own word, reluctantly. Why a nation of elves seated a dragon among its princes is a question the founding accounts declined to answer, and the land of promise kept its secrets well. Its full story, the princes, the borders, the older beings behind them, belongs to a later entry in this series. What this account takes from it is the shape of the thing. 2 years before the wider world had ever heard him speak, he already held a prince's chair in one sovereign nation and a quiet fortune in another. Learn the pattern early, because it never changes. Land, titles, stock, states. To the dragon, they are one substance. He was assembling a position, and in 2037, everyone finally saw what for. The company at the center of what followed carried one of the Old World's proudest names. BMW, the Old World's Bavarian motor company, had survived the collapse of the Old Order and grown through the chaos into a conglomerate of engines, steel, and chemistry, the backbone of the industrial empire that would come to trade as Saeder-Krupp. By the 30s, it stood among the mightiest firms in Germany, and mighty firms believed themselves safe. Its owner was a formidable woman named Wilhelmina Graf Beloit, and she had not come to the firm gently. She had wrested control of it from its own founder, her husband. She, of all people, understood how ownership can be pried from the hands that think they hold it. It did not save her. In 2037, the Great Dragon made an announcement. There was no raid, no proxy fight, no warning in any market ledger. He simply informed the world, and the lady who believed the firm hers, that through years of purchases, routed through avenues no one had thought to watch, he now held 63% of its stock. He would therefore be assuming the presidency himself. The board was dismissed. Wilhelmina Graf Beloit was shown the door of her own house. 63 deserves a pause, because the number is the whole method. A raider in a hurry grabs 51%, control, and no more. He had gone on gathering, unhurried, far past the point of victory, the way a careful engineer overbuilds a bridge, so that when he finally spoke, there was nothing left to fight over. The announcement was a courtesy. The war had been over for years before anyone knew it had been declared. Understand what that morning meant to the people hearing of it. Every purchase was lawful. Every filing was in order. The perimeter every corporation trusts, the ledger itself, had been walked through at leisure, over years, by something that files paperwork the way other predators stalk. The defense against a hostile buyer is to see him coming. No one had seen anything. Out of that morning, the Sixth World distilled its most famous warning, a rule every negotiator, every banker, and every frightened child of this age can recite. Never, whatever the profit, deal with the dragon. What he did with the prize surprised the watchers more than the taking of it. He ran it. Within a decade, the accounts agree, shrewd restructuring and relentless acquisition had driven the German conglomerate upward into the highest tier of corporate power, the small circle of companies so large that the law of nations simply stops at their fences. The age has a word for that arrangement: extraterritoriality. A corporation of the first tier is sovereign on its own ground. Its campuses are its territory, its rules the only law inside them, and its disputes with its peers are heard by a tribunal of its own kind, the corporate court, seated in orbit, beyond any nation's writ. How the corporations climbed to that altitude is a story promised elsewhere in this series. Saeder-Krupp's part in it is simple. It climbed fastest, and it has never come down. The deeper change was harder to see from outside, because it was a change in the nature of time. Every corporation before this one was built around a mortal fact. Owners die. Founders age, heirs squabble. Boards exist to outlast them. Remove that fact, and the institution becomes something new, a body with one will forever. No succession, no drift, no moment of weakness between reigns. Rivals could no longer wait him out, because there is no out. There is only Lofwyr, and then more Lofwyr. And the will at the center reads everything. The accounts of life inside the company return again and again to the owner's appetite for detail, contracts reviewed at the clause, subsidiaries known down to their individual managers, an attention no mortal executive could sustain for a week, sustained for decades. Its instrument is a division the wage earners mention in lowered voices: Saeder-Krupp Prime, the company that manages the company. Troubleshooters dispatched to any subsidiary that drifts, to command it, comb it, and correct it. A joke of the era claimed you could chart the division's visits across Europe by the surge in antacid sales at the subsidiaries' pharmacies. Failure in that system carries a price the shadows still tell stories about. The corporate profiles of the era put it primly. Getting the better of Lofwyr is possible in principle, difficult in practice, and usually fatal in conclusion. The street version is blunter. The dragon keeps a list of those who cross him, and the joke runs that the list and the lunch menu are the same document. Even his own executives are not exempt. Years later, when a showcase tower, a building grown, not built, needed resident executives, its suites were filled with managers who had disappointed him, housed, on display, as a warning with a lease. As for the woman he unseated, in 2050, Wilhelmina Graf Beloit left the Earth itself, withdrawing to the Zurich orbital habitat, the banker's sanctuary above the sky, where the very rich keep their money and, sometimes, themselves. She spent her remaining years there, the accounts say, stewing, watching from above as the empire she had lost grew past every rival on the planet. She died without getting any of it back. Step out of the run of years for a moment and look at the place itself. Because the Sixth World has company towns, and then it has Essen. The old coal and steel heart of Germany, home of the historic Krupp works, whose name survives in the corporate masthead, is in this age the property, functionally, of a single firm, a settlement the geographers class with Ares Detroit, where one corporation is the government, the employer, the landlord, and the law. Life there runs on an arrangement the scholars call economic neo-feudalism. The citizen is bound to the corporation as the serf was bound to the manor. Housing, schooling, medicine, and identity all issue from the employer. Loyalty is a term of the lease, and the media on every screen is the landlord's own voice. In exchange come the two commodities the Sixth World rations most tightly: order and employment. Most residents consider it a fair trade. The perceptive notice how carefully that opinion is manufactured. What Essen manufactures besides opinion is the hard end of civilization. Steel and chemicals, engines and aircraft, finance, and one specialty the connoisseurs of augmentation speak of with awe: headwear. The computers implanted in living skulls, of which its laboratories produce the finest on Earth. In the clinics and catalogs of the age, straight out of Essen is a grade of quality. The Dragon City builds the machinery of thought and sells it pre-installed. The bill for all of it is paid in land and air. The region around the headquarters has hosted some of the worst ecological disasters of the century. The histories note the fact and move very carefully along. And the wider German alliance, Berlin above all, seethes with the era's angriest resistance to corporate rule. Downriver, the free port of Hamburg thrives on smuggling conducted, as its residents cheerfully put it, in the dragon's own backyard. He tolerates the mockery. Tolerance, in his ledger, is what surveillance is called while it is still gathering. Below the public empire runs a private one, and its face has a name. By mid-century, the corporations of this age had long settled into a custom the courts pretend not to see. When work must be done that no company can afford to own, theft, sabotage, extraction, espionage, it is handed to deniable outsiders, the freelance professionals the trade calls Shadowrunners. The anonymous corporate agent who hires them is known, by convention, as a Mr. Johnson. At Saeder-Krupp, the Mr. Johnson has a name of his own: Herr Brackhaus. He has been meeting hired teams in the back rooms of Europe for decades, which is remarkable, chiefly because the man does not exist. Brackhaus is a mask, worn by whoever the dragon sends, played, the wisdom goes, by many actors across many years. The constant is the reputation. Among those who work the shadows, an offer from Herr Brackhaus means the job comes from the very summit of the world, and that one's life is about to become a great deal more complicated. And beneath the mask, the shadows have always sworn, is sometimes the wearer himself. great dragons can fold themselves into metahuman shape, and the oldest rumor in European shadow work holds that on the jobs that truly matter, the unremarkable gentleman across the table, patient, precise, faintly amused, is the gold dragon of Essen, wearing a body cut for the meeting. Proof has never surfaced. Prudent professionals treat every Brackhaus as if it were true. The same quiet hands hold levers most nations would go to war over. The accounts of European business note, in passing and without much alarm, that the government of the United Netherlands had rested in Lofwyr's pocket since the middle 50s. A sovereign state carried on the dragon's books like any other subsidiary. Elsewhere, his recruiters work the sprawls through front organizations, finding the gifted young early and steering them, unaware, toward his service. The empire in the light buys companies. The empire in the dark buys people, and the occasional country. Both keep flawless paperwork. What happens to those who slight him? The record offers one story so complete that it serves for all the others, and the chronicle will follow it to its end before returning to the main line of years. It begins in 2051, with an invitation that never came. Johnny Spinrad was everything the dragon is not: young, loud, glittering, adored. Heir to a Monegasque family fortune, builder of Spinrad Industries, Europe's playground empire of designer chrome and luxury biotech, and for a generation, the most famous man on the continent. In 2051, France awarded a consortium of companies the grand project of rebuilding Monaco, and Spinrad walked away with a 50-year lease and the glory of the decade. Saeder-Krupp had not been invited to the table. The histories record, with some understatement, that the dragon took the omission personally. The revenge took more than a decade to arrive, and when it arrived, it wore the face of journalism. Spinrad's company, grown sloppy in its owner's playboy years, had cut a monstrous corner. Medical experiments run on volunteers who were never told what was being done to them. Proof of it reached the news feeds, and the scandal detonated across Europe. France investigated. The corporate court chose to make an example. Spinrad Industries was stripped of its extraterritorial standing and fined 2 billion nuyen. The most glamorous corporation in Europe was, in an afternoon, demoted from sovereign power to ordinary business. Only later did the design beneath the scandal emerge. The leak was arranged. The evidence was carried to the press by hired shadow teams, and the man who paid them met them under the name Herr Brackhaus. Stranger still, the same French investigations had found identical experiments, on a far grander scale, inside the dragon's own concern. No consequence ever reached Essen. The example was made of the man who had once left the dragon off a guest list. The ledger of that feud has kept filling ever since. By the late 70s, those who count such things counted 6 separate attempts on Johnny Spinrad's life funded from Essen, and Spinrad, who survived them all, ran his Asian operations from distant Macau, in part to keep an ocean between his business and the dragon's gaze. All of it, the ruin, the fear, the decades, priced against one missing invitation. The Sixth World took the lesson to heart. His memory is total, his patience is geological, and his idea of proportion is entirely his own. The chronicle now steps back to 2057, to an upheaval that shook every power of the age, and that reveals, in passing, more about our subject than he has ever volunteered. That summer, the great dragon Dunkelsaan, the one who had risen from the lake, the one who talked, was elected to the presidency of a North American nation and was murdered on the night of his inauguration. This archive has told that story in full and will not retell it here. Set the two dragons side by side, because the age itself never stopped doing so. The dead president had spent 45 years courting the small peoples. Broadcasts, charities, jokes, an interview for every camera. The master of Essen has never granted an interview in his life. He explains nothing, campaigns for nothing, and wears his disdain for metahumanity where every negotiator can see it, offering in place of charm only terms. One dragon wanted to be loved. What the other wants remained, as ever, the open file. Dunkelsan's death set off years of convulsion, a testament that scattered his fortune across the world by lawyer's writ, and a fury among dragonkind at hoard wealth passing under metahuman law. Out of that fury came a reckoning. A white dragon, new to every record, climbed out of the tear the assassination had left in the capital's air and demanded satisfaction of the age. The world calls him Ghostwalker. His tale, too, is told beside the dragon president's. When the affairs of dragons settled, the auditors of power found exactly one change on Lofwyr's books. His chair among the princes of the Elven land, held since the founding in 2035, now belonged to another. Hestaby, a dragon of the American mountains, seated in his place. The tallies of the era judged that he ended those years otherwise undiminished, and quite possibly stronger. Still, mark the entry. In 50 years of records, that council chair is the only possession anyone has ever seen leave the dragon's hands. The next entry is written in claw marks. Among the great dragons of Europe moved one called Nachtmeister, Master of the Night, as the German has it, who had spent the same decades building his own quiet web through the continent's finance. For a time, the Sixth World held two dragons playing the same game on the same board. The day that arrangement became intolerable is nowhere written down. What is written is the end. In the early 60s, the histories disagree on the season, Nachtmeister died, and he died at Lofwyr's talons. No lawsuit, no tender offer, no proxy war. For a rival of his own kind, the owner of Essen set aside the instruments of half a century and used the original ones. The shock of it rolled through the European corporate world for years, pulling even distant powers into the turbulence. The same era offers this history its darkest glimpse beneath the corporate skin. Whispers from the medical shadows describe a program inside Saeder-Krupp practicing cybermancy, a forbidden craft that uses cage spirits to keep the heavily machined alive past the point where flesh gives out. And the whispers add that a technique so old and so dark had to be taught by someone. The obvious teacher has scales. It is testimony, and only testimony. No outsider was ever allowed to check. The shadows drew a simple lesson from those years. The contracts, the lawyers, the patients, all of it is preference, and none of it is necessity. Beneath the businessman's method sleeps everything the old stories ever said a dragon was. And still, no one could say toward what end the whole apparatus, gold, law, and now blood, was pointed. By the 60s, the Sixth World had a second world laid over it, the Matrix, the planetary data network, heir to the old internet, through which the age conducts its commerce, its memory, and most of its speech. Its full history, 2 great catastrophes included, is promised its own chronicle later in the series. One night of it, however, belongs here. In November of 2064, the network began to die. A fanatic cult and a weaponized program, the full account waits in that later telling, tore through the world's systems, and everything wired began to burn with them. Markets, hospitals, aircraft, governments. The sixth world was welded to the Matrix, and the Matrix was failing. On the 2nd of November 2064, one being made a decision that no parliament, no army, and no alliance of nations had the authority to make. From Essen, Lofwyr ordered the European Matrix shut down. And it was done. One owner's word, and the second world of an entire continent went dark. Every market, every archive, every message from Lisbon to the Baltic, switched off like a lamp in a study. In Spain, where the grid went black from border to border, the blackout cracked the state itself. A young king reached for emergency powers, arguing before his people that a nation has no sovereignty worth the name if, as the era remembered it, a dragon in Germany can switch their country off from his desk. He was obeyed. The argument was unanswerable. And when the catastrophe finally burned out, the auditors of the ruin noticed something. Europe stood wounded, yet far less wounded than North America, and the continent's survivors credited the difference in a phrase poised exactly between gratitude and dread to our Lord and Master in Essen. The amputation had been the mercy. 2037 had shown what the dragon could buy. The 2nd of November showed what owning it meant. After the second collapse, the histories begin measuring his reach on a planetary scale, and the measurements read like weather reports. In Hong Kong, the freest market on Earth, the corporation's Swiss bank arm grew into the city's third greatest financial power, the beachhead, the analysts judged, from which the dragon plays the markets of all Asia, through brokerages and funds beyond counting. Very little of Asia ever notices whose money it is. Japan noticed. The commentators of the era record a curiosity there. Financial houses, grown strangely fearless before the corporation's own tribunal and the imperial ministries alike, and the explanation offered never varied. The boardrooms of Japan fear Lofwyr. Even Ryumyo, the great dragon of Mount Fuji, the first of all the returned, in whose home waters those markets swim, was seen to let the intrusion pass unchallenged, and the watchers of the age could only ask one another why. One region of the earth, alone, consistently refuses him. In the Middle East, a rising oil giant called Global Sandstorm beats the dragon's conglomerate in nearly every market where the two compete, the only sustained defeat in the modern record, and the accounts describe the dragon's resentment of it as legendary. Yet mark the shape even of his failures. Nothing already his was lost. One region simply declined, and declines still, to be taken. By 2070, the atlas of his holdings had stopped resembling a company and begun resembling a climate. Bankers in Hong Kong, frightened boardrooms in Japan, a government in the Low Countries, a city in Germany, and file rooms everywhere. The Sixth World had granted many corporations the standing of nations. It had never before contended with one that was also a single, undying mind. The 70s opened with the Matrix producing miracles, and with the dragon treating a miracle as inventory. In 2070, the world learned that a scattered few people had emerged from the network's chaos changed. Technomancers, able to touch the Matrix with the bare mind, no machine in between. Panic followed them everywhere. Corporations hunted them, and laboratories waited for them. The conduct of Saeder-Krupp in those years was quieter and stranger. Inside the dragon's own workforce, technomancers were identified early, and then nothing visible happened to them at all. They were watched, cataloged, held in reserve like an ore body mapped but unmined, their names entered in files they did not know existed. The analysts of the era, asked what the dragon intended, produced the assessment that had become tradition by then. Only the spirits know what Saeder-Krupp is doing. Lofwyr is, as usual, the wild card. It is worth pausing on why a mind like his hoards information with such appetite. Because the awakened world offers a clue, and it is the closest thing to a weakness the record contains. Among magicians, there exists an art of divination, readings of what may come, practiced by seers and oracle societies. The scholars of magic note, carefully, that Dunkelsson could never work that art. He bought his glimpses of the future from a guild of seers, and they add, more carefully still, that the gold dragon appears to share the same blindness. The greatest schemer of the age cannot see tomorrow at all. Read his whole method again in that light. The total files, the mapped employees, the memorized clauses, the agents in every shadow. A creature that cannot scry the future has one alternative: to own so much of the present that the future has nowhere else to come from. One step ahead is a promise. The record suggests he keeps it by hand, one purchase certainty at a time. Of all the beings in these pages, one knew him longest. The history is named the great dragon Alame as Lofwyr's brother, as old, as proud, and far less patient, and they trace between the two a rivalry running back past the awakening, past the edge of anything written. The shadows joke that the brothers even shared their masks, that on some evenings, Herr Brackhaus was played by Alame himself, come to inspect his siblings' empire from the inside. In the middle 70s, the rivalry stopped being a private coldness and became open war, dragon against dragon, fought with armies of metal and magic in and above the ruined Italian sprawl the age calls Gamito. The accounts describe Saeder-Krupp subsidiaries conscripted wholesale, product lines redirected, an industrial empire turned for a season into one being's personal arsenal. It ended the way wars against Lofwyr end. Alame, a great dragon of the sixth world, his brother, his oldest rival, is dead. The whispers around that war run deeper. A secret lodge of mages said to have had a hand in it, and a convulsion of dragonkind in those same years, vast enough that the histories call it a civil war. All of that, the fury of the dragon chirurg, the price the small peoples paid, the full account of the brothers' reckoning, is the final chronicle of this series, and it will be told in its place. Here, the record keeps only the arithmetic. Twice, another great dragon set itself against him. Neither exists anymore. So the history arrives at the present age and finds the empire at its zenith. The rankings of 2075 place Saeder-Krupp first among the 10 great corporations of the earth, first in size, first in reach. Heavy industry, chemistry, finance, and aerospace, with the owners' holdings standing at very nearly 100%. Half a century after a dismissed board in Germany, no rival has ever displaced him. One has claimed to. In the years after the Dragon's War, the market watchers reported the unthinkable. Saeder-Krupp, distracted, slowed, and at last overtaken in the standings by a Japanese rival. The seasoned observers of the shadows refused, almost to a voice, to believe a word of it. Their verdict survives in the commentary of the age. Lofwyr is a con dragon, and the stumble is the performance. While every eye tracked the standings, and the powers of the earth looked outward toward Mars, his corporation quietly finished one of the great engineering feats of the century: an elevator into orbit, a working cable from the Earth's surface into space. The audience was still watching the wrong hand. Which leaves the question the age has never closed, and one final image for it. Enter the corporation's own province of the Matrix, the region its engineers named the Uberwelt, the Overworld, and you pass beneath its emblem, a colossal silver dragon in flight above a spinning earth, claws sweeping the globe as it turns, eyes scanning the surface as if keeping watch over everything below. Every newcomer assumes the emblem is the owner. Look closer, as the older generation eventually did. The features are softened, made gentler, made kind, and they belong to Dunkelzahn. Over the empire of the dragon who despises sentiment, who grants no interviews and explains no decisions, keeps watch the beloved face of the one being the sixth world would have trusted with everything. Dead now these 20 years, wearing, in the sky of Lofwyr's own domain, an expression Lofwyr has never once worn. He has never explained it. He has never explained anything. 50 years, and the ledger stands thus. He owns the largest company on Earth, outright and in the open. He has outweighted every rival, outlived the woman he unseated, and outfought two of his own kind. His paperwork has never once been faulted, and his purpose has never once been glimpsed. Anyone can read what the dragon owns. What the dragon wants, the sixth world does not get to know. It only gets to live inside the design, one signature at a time, keeping, in the meanwhile, the single rule it is sure of: never deal with dragons. Until the next chronicle, go carefully in the sixth world.